from this dude describing how empires fall. Give this a listen.
Not a panicky, alarmist type person, and I don't do conspiracy theories. But history tells us this country is on the verge of collapse. I will quickly give you the 6 things that lead to the collapse of an empire, in this case, the United States. Ray Dalio studied the rise and fall of empires going back 500 years, and every time, the collapse was followed by the same 6 phases. Phase 1 was a new order rising, strong leadership, solid education, innovation, unity. Yeah, we had that. Post-World War II, when we actually built stuff and invested in people.
That's super fascinating that he says that. I'm not completely convinced that we had that, although post World War II was a kind of golden age, especially since the people returning from the war like had military pensions and the economy was in like a really, really good place at the time and everything. That's interesting.
Phase 2 was peace and prosperity. Productivity booms, the economy grows, people trust in institutions. Well, we had that. The middle class was strong, unions had power, and the government wasn't a punchline.
That's true.
Phase 3 is massive debt and wealth gaps. The rich get richer, and the poor get tax advice like stop buying coffee. Well, we're there, because the top 1% own more wealth than the entire middle class combined. Phase 4, internal conflict and political polarization.
All right, let me just step back for a second here. What he mentioned here, the top 1% own more wealth than the entire middle class combined. This is an actual intentional strategy by Republicans. I don't know if people realize this, but there's a strategy called Starve the Beast, where Republicans want to destroy the government, right? That's like a stated goal. Make it so small that you can drown it in a bathtub, Grover Norquist. But they know they need Democrats' help to do it. They can't just go off half-cocked and do it themselves. So their strategy is to complain about taxes and say, we need tax cuts, we need tax cuts, we need tax cuts. And they cut them into the ground until the government literally cannot afford to, like, there's no funding, no nothing. So you have to cut programs. Only tax cuts have led to the filthy rich getting filthy richer. And at this point, we can't cut spending enough to dig our way out of this. We must raise taxes on the rich. There's no other choice. So the reason that we're in this position, top 1% own more wealth than the entire middle class combined, was a direct, intentional effort by Republicans to destroy the U.S. government. And it's a known political strategy that is discussed openly and written about in books and everything and enacted directly. That's why we're here.
Phase 4, internal conflict and political polarization. Trust erodes, people stop believing in the system. Well, we have one party destroying the country and the others watching. Nobody's solving.
Now, that's a super fascinating perspective, right? One party's destroying the country and the other is watching.
Phase 5 is the loss of reserve currency status and global power. Dalio said this stage includes excessive debt creation, weakening productivity, and rising internal conflict. Debt, we're at 36 trillion and climbing. We're adding a trillion every 100 days. Productivity has slowed drastically. Internal conflict, well, amongst a million other things, 58% of Republicans still think the 2020 election was stolen.
Yeah, this is super fascinating too. Listen to what he says here one more time.
Solving. Phase 5 is the loss of reserve currency status and global power.
If people don't know what that means, let me just kind of elaborate on this a little bit. When people say that we're the reserve currency, what that means is the US dollar is viewed as powerful, as strong and unlikely to default. Like we're going to continue to pay interest payments on the debt, right? It's not going to default, most likely. And as a result, when people want a very secure, safe investment that they know is going to work out well on their behalf, they'll invest in the dollar. They'll buy a whole bunch of our debt, right? So we spend a bunch of money, or somebody buys a bunch of government US bonds, and the US Treasury puts that money into our bank account and pays for various things, and we give them this certificate. Basically says you can call in this debt anytime you want, and it's going to gain interest of, I don't know, like 1% per year or something like that. But it's a solid, trustworthy source of information, or a source of interest that you know is going to come back to you. But and that makes the U.S. currency more powerful, but the world is losing trust in the dollar, in the U.S. government, and our ability to pay for things. So they're going to start calling in those debts, and the U.S. government is going to have to start paying out even more because the world has kind of lost faith in the US dollar. That's what loss of reserve currency means. The world does not view us as a stable country anymore, and they don't trust our economy. That's what he means by that.
Status and global power. Dalio said this stage includes excessive debt creation, weakening productivity, and rising internal conflict. Debt, we're at 36 trillion and climbing. We're adding a trillion every 100 days. Productivity has slowed drastically. Internal conflict, well, amongst a million other things, 58% of Republicans still think the 2020 election was stolen. Clearly, we're deep in phase 5. Phase 6 is collapse, revolt, or radical reset. Dalio said this phase usually brings civil wars, revolutions, or a major restructuring of the system. Now look around. We've had an insurrection attempt, record gun violence, massive protests, jobs plummeting, the military deployed in Los Angeles, election denial, alligator Alcatraz, and even the Supreme Court giving Trump a green light to pretty much do whatever he wants unimpeded. We're not fully there yet, but there are cracks. I like to think I'm a realistic optimist, but since we've already hit 5 phases and we're teetering on 6, I think our only chance at righting the ship is in the midterms. So we better get loud and stay loud, because this MAGA experiment has done nothing but fast track us to be another example in Ray Dalio's book.
That's absolutely fascinating. And honestly, I think that what he said there about riding out,
Chance at righting the ship is in the midterms.
yeah, righting the ship in the midterms. I know that people feel like